Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video going over the new ambition system in Age of Wonders 4. We're going to be covering it using a tier list. There are 20 different ambitions that heroes, when you recruit them, can have associated with them, and then they also have a governor trait associated with them. We'll talk about the governor traits more at the end of the video since it is part of the decision when it comes to recruiting heroes. I recently just watched a video about the hero rework system by We Play Games, and he spent about 5 minutes talking about the ambition system. So this is a really good video to supplement that discussion. If I recall correctly, I think Walker mentioned there were two big reasons for him not wanting to talk more about the ambition system in detail, and that's because a lot of these numbers are very likely to change. We're going to see some rebalancing so that they're more on par with each other, and some just don't elevate themselves above each other. We already have one of these traits that has been reworked. The Prospector trait was just above and beyond better than everything else. And I think when Walker was making his video, they had announced that they were going to be reworking it, but they hadn't mentioned exactly how the new version of Prospector would work. So yeah, to an extent, I understand not wanting to talk about it for that reason. And then the other reason he mentioned was that the heroes here are mostly for combat, and you should mostly be considering what the classes can do for you in combat and how that can help you clear the map and farm the map. But I have to say that I think these choices are very interesting, and some of them just are a lot better than others. And highlighting that for new players and veteran players, I think, is generally a pretty useful thing to do. All right, without further ado, let's start building our tier list. You can actually see the 17 options that you can put on your ruler at the beginning of the game over here with this slightly different background. The three over here are things that can only go on your heroes. They can't go on the ruler. The ambitions that can only go on your ruler are going to be easiest to look at during the faction creation menu. You can see the 17 options on the right here, and I think we'll actually start with the default one. Instructor is probably the best one out of all these options. I actually placed it in S tier, but let's talk more about the details before we actually place it over there in S tier. This says that when you have a army full of legendary rank units in this hero stack, they will get the trainer bonus and they'll get 200 renown. We haven't talked too much about renown, but this is generally how you make your governor bonuses give you better stuff. And this is the aspect of heroes that I remember Walker saying it's the least meaningful. What you want to be paying attention to the most are the classes, the things like mages and ranger, and then the ambitions are going to be sometimes able to give you good stuff. So you may want to take that into consideration, but it's pretty minor relative to the classes. And yeah, trainer is going to make it so that all non-hero units that are in the same stack as this leader are going to gain experience a lot faster, and that's quite good. Getting more experience will allow you to get more ranks, which will give your units better stats and sometimes better interactions. I remember seeing that the new Dark Warrior can sprint now. When it gets to a certain metal, it gets the ability to basically move further on the battlefield. So generally speaking, this isn't that hard to accomplish. Getting a bunch of tier 1 units to legendary rank is relatively easy to do. And then this minor ambition is just ranking up units. Whenever a unit gains a little bit of, or when they cross their threshold to rank up to the next medal, then you'll get 5 renown. And I believe you need 400 renown in order to get yourself to tier 4. So this means that you'll need to rank up quite a few units in order to get to tier 4, but relative to the other things, this is pretty easy to accomplish. You get a tiny bit of renown, but it adds up quite quickly. The fact that this ambition is really good at farming renown early in the game makes it an excellent choice to put on your ruler and a really good choice to put on heroes that have the better governor traits, the ones that you really want to level up the renown on. For example, the fortification governor, they don't give a very good bonus compared to the thing you can get on your main ruler. When they get to level 4 renown, then they're going to get units in this city get +1 rank, but even at level 3 you get a little bit of Imperium, which is generally pretty good, and at level 2 it makes it so the city grows quicker. If you can get that relatively early, you're going to be able to unlock the higher level city halls a lot earlier, because you'll have the populations to unlock the boost to get there. But if we just take a second and look at some of the other guys here and their um, governor bonuses, this guy, he really likes mines, so he's an okay option for um, trying to put the instructor ambition on. And somebody like the scholarly governor, he's one of the best ones you can get. If you get him with instructor, that's a really good combination. But unfortunately, this guy has Fearmonger, which is just, it's one of the harder ones to get to work if you're in manual combat. If you're playing single player and you're able to get into manual combat often, this is a very good combo. But if you're in a multiplayer where you can't manual combats, it's going to be almost impossible to complete this ambition. But of course, the devs did build in systems to make it so that you can pick new ambitions if you're having a hard time completing your ambitions. So keep that in mind when you're making your decisions for hiring heroes. The next ambition we're going to talk about here is the Challenger ambition, and this is all about taking fights where the enemy has more power than you, and it pairs decently well with Strife. But the tricky thing about this is that it is something that is going to be harder to do in auto combats than it will be in manual combats, which makes it better in single player than it will be in most multiplayers. But if you're able to accomplish this goal, it gives you a pretty decent bonus. It gives you aggressive tactician. This says, while army leader, all units in army start combat hastened for 3 turns, which is a pretty decent effect to have on your units for 3 whole turns. When we compare that to Delver, Delver's just bad. Delver is gonna fall into the bottom of our tree, because getting unstoppable leader is just, it's nothing. It's relatively easy to farm up renown using the um, excavate province interaction, and then clearing out an underground infestation isn't too tricky to come across. If you're excavating provinces, it's fairly common to generate an underground infestation that you can clear out. But you may have to spend some Imperium to start excavating things if you don't have the starts that give you that right at the beginning of turn 1, like the Primal Spider. The tunneling Primal Spider, I think, gives you that, and then underground adaptation gives you that. So yeah, I think now that we've discussed both Delver and Challenger, I think we can head back to this window and place them in there. Delver is the little pickaxe, and Challenger is 2 swords. So let's go find those in here. Delver was gonna be, I think, in the very bottom, and this one, yeah, I've had this in my notes as a C tier. There's a lot that fall into this because they are better in single player than they are in multiplayer, but my general preference is multiplayer. And then we did talk a little bit about Delver, so we'll put him down here too. It is also worth mentioning that the minor ambition on Delver requiring a hero to excavate provinces is pretty inefficient, because generally when I'm excavating provinces, I'll use either a tier 1 unit that I've split off from my starting units, or a scout that I have from either the beginning of the game or I've built throughout the game, because generally the input cost for sending those guys over to the areas that need to be excavated is relatively low, and the heroes are relatively rare and valuable. So I think sending them down to excavate isn't very optimal. Now we can move on to Collector, which is a very good ambition. This one wants you to equip items to your hero. Just having an item equipped for 5 turns will give you only 2 renown, and once again, you need 400 in order to max out the renown track. So it's going to be very hard for you to get to level 4 governorship using this minor ambition, but you can get quite a bit from the major ambition. It gives you 200 renown. Some of them give you, I think, 150, and others give 100. Yeah, this one gives 100. It is going to be slightly easier to complete this major ambition, slightly harder to complete that minor ambition, but the renown rewards they reflect that. Going back to Collector, this says that when you complete the major ambition, when you fully equipped this hero with tier 2 or better items, you're going to get the Renown, you're going to get a lot of Binding Essence, and you're going to get Equipment Mastery. I think Equipment Mastery really elevates this ambition above the others because some of them, they impact combat a little bit, some of them impact the strategic map, and this one impacts combat quite significantly. This can add up to be quite a large number of HP, and the fact that that's not all you get, the fact that you get 600 Binding Essence to allow you to craft some really nice items is pretty special. That there are some things that give two effects, but generally they're not quite as impactful as what you get for Collector. Now, I'm going to place the Collector ambition in A tier, and I'm sure some people are looking at that and thinking that it's got to be about as good as the Instructor ambition that I put in S tier, but I feel like the accessibility to getting renown on the Instructor ambition is just a little bit more valuable than the reward you get for completing the major ambition on the Collector. Don't get me wrong, it is really good, and there are certain builds that will elevate Collector to be on par with Instructor, if not better. For example, if you're playing Industrious, you're going to have access to a lot more items through the prospecting mechanic, and in that situation, you may want to take a Collector over an Instructor. And I do think that once you've cleared the map a little bit, once you're getting into the mid to late game, then you can make the argument for Collector a little bit more than you could in the early game. The next ambition we're going to talk about here is the Conqueror ambition, which actually has quite a bit of nuance to it for something that appears relatively straightforward. This is all about going around the map and conquering cities, whether that be free cities or cities that belong to another player. You only need to win 4 siege battles to get the 400 renown to max out your governance trait. And I think this is much better on a hero that you recruit than on your ruler because it can take a while to get to the point on a map that you are going to be sieging cities, and it can take a while to siege 4 cities down. Another part of this is the major ambition says that when you win a siege battle against a thrown city with this ruler in that fight, then you're going to get the Demolitionist, which is awesome because this is a reworked version of the Devastator Sphere. The Devastator Sphere, I think, used to have less than 60 HP, less armor or resistance. Maybe both of those were lower, and I don't think he dealt quite as much damage. The fact that he's going to have 48 movement points is definitely different. I know that is different because I remember these guys struggling a lot with getting into position to actually impact the fight. So I love the fact that this is kind of built into um, this ambition now, and that it's something that I probably wouldn't want to put on my ruler, but it's something that when I do see it on a hero, when I'm getting to go attack another player, I'm probably going to take it because it's very good just to have more units on the battlefield. Now, I have to admit, I had a little bit of trouble figuring out where I wanted to place the Conqueror ambition in the tier list. I do think there are certain situations on the map where this does become an A tier or an S tier pick because you're going on the offense and you're going to be conquering cities in the near future. But there's also situations where you need to go farm the map and you're not going to be able to conquer cities anytime soon, and that would all of a sudden make this a pretty poor option to pick on your heroes that you're recruiting. But of course, there's other factors you want to take into consideration, like what items do I have and what kind of builds would really benefit my army. But I think in general, this ambition lands in the middle for me because it can vary so much. It can be very good and it can be like next to useless. The Crusader ambition is a really interesting one because, like Challenger, I think it is going to be easier to accomplish in single player when you can manually control your units, because it will be a lot easier for you to personally set up this unit to slay tier 4 units that complete its major ambition and its minor ambition. But there are things that you can do to make it so that you're more likely to have this unit kill a tier 4 in a fight. For example, you can only send in this unit. If you have a level 12 dragon, they can actually solo the Ancient Wonders relatively consistently. And I've been hearing about this strategy from the multiplayers. It sounds like something that can allow you to use this in multiplayer, but I don't like the idea of me sending a single unit in to clear out an Ancient Wonder. It seems like something they'll probably nerf and make it so it's harder to do in the future, but that is something that you can keep in consideration. The reward you get from this is meaningful. Being able to apply Faithful and Zeal to all the units in the army is going to make it so that you deal more damage, and so you spend less money on your armies, as well as you get certain interactions. I think for having the Faithful tag on your units, I believe there is a special interaction with the Tome of Cleansing Flame that benefits you for having the Faithful tag. So for this ambition, I originally placed it in C tier, but that was before I heard about how it could be used in multiplayer if you just use a single unit. I don't know if that's enough for me to elevate it up to B tier or A tier. It I think requires more micro than I'm a fan of, so I think we'll just leave it here in C tier for now. When I first read the description of the Defender ambition, I have to admit I really did not like it because it seems very inaccessible. The minor ambition needing you to win a battle in friendly terrain is something that you can build your cities around. You can try and make it so that the nodes that you want to clear become part of your friendly territory before you clear them. But that doesn't seem very efficient, and I think that this is more designed for clearing out marauders that come into your friendly territory or dealing with enemy rulers that are trying to pillage your provinces. And then when you take that into consideration, it can become relatively accessible once you get into the mid to late game where there are a lot of people just trying to pillage provinces. Um, and then having a requirement that says you need 100 fortification health seems like a lot, but I think the reward you get for it is worth it. When you compare the militarist reward to the other bonuses you get, I think this one is quite good. It's quite a bit better than some of the others. It makes it so that you get +1 defense on your frontline units, which won't protect you against magic attacks, and it won't protect your supports and your battle mages, but in general, just having +1 defense across 6 units, it's quite good. So when we think about the defender in relation to these other guys, I have to say I think it's pretty close to Conqueror. There are situations where their minor and major ambitions become more accessible than others, but it does vary a similar amount. And if you can get the right criteria, I think this can elevate itself up to A. And then if there are, it's really hard to get the uh, things built in time to get the militarist benefit. If it's hard to get the fortification before you're dealing with invaders, then all of a sudden this guy becomes like D tier. It's not going to be very useful very early in the game, but I think it's about as useful as the Conqueror ambition. Part of me really wants to like the Dominator ambition because it has a strong effect when you can complete the major ambition to recruit or raise a tier 4 unit after combat. This Domination ability will make it so that you can mind control enemies and use their actions to hurt their old friends, and then if they're alive at the end of the combat, you can try to keep that unit using mana. That's incredibly powerful. Very few of the effects here are near anything close to this effect. A lot of them grant passive bonuses. This is an activating ability that just generally shifts the combat in a very significant way. So it is nice if you're able to accomplish this goal, but every time I've seen the Dominator ambition come up in game, the hero that has that has to pick a new ambition after 10 or 15 turns because it takes a long time to set this up, and it's something more for the late game than it is for the early game. So if you get to the late game and you see this and you can recruit or raise a tier 4 unit after combat, you probably should consider that. But otherwise, I think this one's actually pretty bad. Which is why I placed the Dominator ambition here in C tier. I almost put it in D tier, but it's still better than Delver. Delver doesn't do anything useful, whereas at least you get something in certain situations with the Domination ambition. The Duelist ambition is similar to the Dominator ambition in that it will be easier to get the renown points in single player games where you can just hop into manual combat whenever you see a hero to go attack. But if you are playing in multiplayer, this minor ambition in particular is going to be a lot harder to achieve, and the major ambition can be a little bit trickier to achieve. But if you know you're going to go fight another empire, their ruler is very likely to show up in the combat. So picking a duelist before you go on the offense can be arguably a decent move. But then having this unit specifically kill that ruler can be very easy to forget once you get into the fight. If you're able to remember that when you get into the fight, then you get this duelist benefit, which is massive. It's about as good as the domination effect, but it is something that has more specific use cases for fighting heroes with heroes. You're gonna deal more damage if you have this effect, and you'll be able to take less damage from other heroes if you have this effect. While you could argue that the Duelist is better than the Dominator ambition and that it's similar to the Conqueror in that it can be good to pick up before you go attack another player, even in multiplayer, I think just because of the level of micro that it requires, I'm going to place it down here and see because I'm not a fan of things that require a lot of micromanagement in order to accomplish their goals. The explorer ambition was one that I really was not a fan of when I first read this because clearing out a gold ancient wonder is relatively hard to do. But I actually saw some multiplayer games this past week that changed my mind on this. I think that if you build your heroes the right way, you can actually clear out gold wonders early enough that you can get enough value out of Farseer that this is probably not that bad of a pick across the board, and you can clear out Ancient Wonders relatively early in the game and get quite a bit of value out of that too if you build your empire the right way. I think there's another one that works a bit like this that at first I liked a lot more, but I think that you get more value out of clearing Ancient Wonders than you do out of clearing infestations. And every once in a while, it can be kind of tricky to find a gold level infestation, whereas I think you can see on the map the gold ancient wonders a little bit more easily. There's a big tree one that like I think is called Mother Tree that you can spot out in the fog of war pretty easily. Now, the other part of this is that you get a lot of vision, sensing range, and true sight. True sight means that you can see invisible or camouflage units within this guy's vision range, which is going to be a lot given that you're getting +6 from this Farseer effect. And then if we wanted to compare Explorer to Lawbringer a little bit more here, we can take a look at Pragmatic leader, which makes it so that your units get cold-blooded. They get -20% upkeep, which is not bad. It's pretty good. I think this is a pretty decent combat effect if you don't already have a source of cold-blooded. But if you do, then arguably this is quite a bit worse than just having extra vision because extra vision means you can make decisions that other people wouldn't be able to. You'll be aware of things a little bit earlier, and that will allow you to make better plans for either going on the offense or defending your own territory. My first draft of this tier list had both the Lawbringer ambition and the Explorer ambition in the B tier, but I think based off of the reasons that I mentioned not too long ago, the Explorer trait should probably be elevated up to A tier. I do think it is ever so slightly better than Lawbringer, and Lawbringer almost made it into A tier as well. I think it's just slightly below the line, and these things can be heavily modified by the map state. If you don't have any infestations around you to go clear, then all of a sudden Lawbringer is not useful. It could be D tier if like literally you have no infestations anywhere near your territory. And likewise, if you have no ancient wonders anywhere near your territory, then all of a sudden this guy can go all the way down to D tier. But I think generally speaking, Explorer is better than Lawbringer. The Fearmonger ambition has to be one of my least favorite ambitions because of its requirement on the major ambition there. It says win a battle where 5 enemies routed to get the 200 renown and this intimidating effect. If this intimidating effect was as useless as the thing you get in Delver, Fearmonger would easily be my least favorite out of all the ambitions because this requirement. It basically requires you to go into manual combat. While technically it is possible for 5 enemies to rout in an auto combat, I don't think I've ever seen that happen. I may have seen that happen in a big fight where I was just able to reduce morale as outside of killing enemies, but that just seems like something that's going to be harder to get to accomplish relative to all these other ambitions. So now, before we move on, let's actually take a second to look at what Fearmonger gives you when you complete the major ambition. It gives you Intimidating Aura, reducing morale of enemies that are standing next to this unit at the end of its turn, and it also gets Vicious Killer, which is another way to reduce morale. So it makes sense from a thematic point of view, and it's actually relatively strong. It's not the strongest effect you can get, but it's decently strong. Now, before we hop back to the tier list, I actually wanted to talk about two other things that fall into the same tier, into the C tier. The Gloryseeker is one that requires you to do more manual combats. This says when you personally slay a legendary rank unit in combat, then you'll get 100 renown and you'll get rank slayer, which is very good, but you have to personally take out the legendary rank unit. If another unit in your stack kills off the legendary ranked units, then you won't get the renown and you won't get this rank slayer bonus, which is quite nice. That isn't nothing. It's actually quite a bit better than Fearmonger, but I think because this guy requires a lot of micro, I'm gonna put it in the same tier. I'm gonna put it in the C tier and say that it could be quite good. The Raider ambition was another ambition that I put in the C tier, so I figured we'd just talk about this quickly. It's similar to Gloryseeker and Fearmonger in that I don't love it a lot, but I do think it has some utility. This will give you 100 renown and the Resourceful trait when you win a combat in enemy territory. And Resourceful makes it so that when this is an army leader, the units in that army will get plus 10 HP regeneration in the world map, which can be very good when you're going on the offense. But generally speaking, it's not a great reward. And while I think a lot of these things are more accessible, like they don't require manual combat, I just don't think the reward is good enough to elevate it past this lower tier. With that being said, if you are playing Strife, then it will be a lot easier for you to complete your minor ambition. One of the weird things about this, though, is that the hero has to be the unit to pillage the provinces, and you probably don't want to spend too long in one place with a hero unit. Leaving them in place for 2 turns, or even just 1 turn, can be kind of risky. Okay, now let's just take a second to place Fearmonger, the Gloryseeker, and Raider here in C tier. I think that's everything I have in C tier, and we can move on to the next one. The next two ambitions we're going to talk about here are Imperialist and Privateer. Both made it into the B tier. There was one more that made it into the B tier called Steward that it doesn't appear in this list, but I did get it to appear in game. So we'll take a look at that pretty soon. But without further ado, Imperialist says basically that you want to go attack free cities. The minor ambition isn't for sieging the free city, it's just for winning a fight against any army that's associated with a free city. So that's relatively easy to farm renown off of, which can allow you to get to the higher levels of governorship relatively early. But I think the main selling point here is once you win a siege battle against a free city, you get the Siege Master effect, which will make it so that all of your guys get +1 fortification damage against the cities, which in turn can make it so that it's easier to knock down other cities 1 turn earlier. But generally speaking, I think you'll get less value out of this strategic effect than you would out of Conqueror. If we just compare this to Conqueror, you'll see that Conqueror says some pretty similar stuff. This wants you to siege down uh, any old city for the minor ambition, and then it has to be a specific city for the main ambition. So it's harder to accomplish, but the reward is better. Getting the ability to summon in a unit is generally a lot better than just knocking down a city one turn earlier. The privateer ambition is one that I like about as much as I like Imperialist for similar reasons. It's pretty good at farming up renown to give you the better governance bonuses. And then if you wanted to try and complete the major ambition, it does give you something that's kind of nice on the strategic level, but it doesn't impact combat. It's not like summoning in a unit in combat or getting extra defense or extra damage in combat. Those effects are generally better than things like Ambusher, who will give your guys universal camouflage, making it so they can't be seen in the world map, which is interesting. It can allow you to get some advantages in fights that they otherwise wouldn't. You wouldn't have, and it can allow you to sneak up on the enemy and try and siege down things and do a lot of interesting things. But generally speaking, I wouldn't value this that highly. Now let's just take a second to actually move Imperialist into B tier and Privateer into B tier. I believe Shepherd was an A tier, and let's take a closer look at that now. The Shepherd ambition is one of my favorite ambitions because of how it interacts with evolution units. A lot of the lower tier units, like the level 1 elementals and animals and plants, can evolve into tier 3s, and a lot of the tier 2s can evolve into tier 4s, but that's generally very risky. And I know a lot of people who play Age of Wonders 4 competitively with their friends, they don't use the evolution units just because they are generally a little bit weaker and they die in combat quite a lot as a result. So it is a bit of a risk to try and use the shepherd, but the reward you get for winning a combat with only animals, plants, and elementals on your side is quite significant. It gives you plus 20 HP on all of those units, and it makes it so that they are cheaper to upkeep. So once they evolve, you won't have to deal with as that giant drain on your mana that generally happens when they do evolve. When then they go to a higher tier, they require, I think, like 10 or 15 more mana per unit. So if a bunch of them evolve in one turn, you can go from plus like 50 mana to minus 50 mana, which can hurt a lot and can be kind of tricky to plan around. But having those higher tier units is generally a good thing, not a bad thing, because that means that you're going to have an easier time when you get into combat. As I mentioned earlier, some of these ambitions can only be applied to heroes, and they recently moved this Prospector one from the list that you could apply to your rulers to only be something that you can apply to heroes. And it used to be S tier. It used to be that nothing else could compete with this because the Artisan equipment is really, really good. Plus 10 HP, plus 1 defense, plus 1 resistance, plus 10% damage at the cost of basically making the units more expensive. This says while army leader, all other units will get the boost. This doesn't apply to the ruler. It just will make the other units that it's leading better, and they'll cost more at the end of your turn if you have them in the same army as this guy. But you can shuffle things around to get around that. It is actually going to be a lot harder to accomplish. The governed city has a gold income of plus 200. If this is not on your capital, if this is not on your ruler, then you're going to have to build up that gold income from a lot smaller of a number. I think the exact number isn't particularly important, but another interesting thing we can note here is that the minor ambition for the prospector is to simply clear a resource node, which you're probably going to be doing anyways, so you can get a pretty decent amount of renown just by playing the game you normally would, and then you can get those governor bonuses for simply just playing the game the way you normally do. The last two ambitions we're going to talk about are Steward and Elitist. As you can see here, I did generate a lot of heroes to see if there were any other ambitions that weren't in the list for the rulers, but there is a chance that I missed one. I only saw Prospector appear once, so it could be that that I just didn't generate enough worlds to see one or two of the other ambitions, but I feel pretty confident that there are 20 of them. 20 makes sense from a design perspective. You know, it's a nice whole number, round number, even number. And yeah, let's take a second to take a look at what Steward does. This is basically for managing cities. If you can get your cities to be really big, you get the Protector bonus, which makes it so that adjacent friendly units get +1 defense and +1 resistance. That's generally a lot easier to use than the one that gave you +1 armor on certain unit types, but it's also harder to unlock. Getting a city to population 16 takes a long time. And it's something that will only come into play in the mid to late game. You can't get up to 16 pops in the early game. That's just impossible, regardless of how good you are and how much you play. You can't get up to 16 pops too quickly. And then the other part of this is that if your city simply has positive stability for 5 turns, you get 25 renown on this hero type. It's pretty unique and it's pretty interesting that um, it works this way when you compare it to everything else. And then Elitist. Elitist says that once you reach level 12, then you get the Renown and you get the Ruler's Retinue. If this hero is in the same battle as your ruler, this hero and your ruler have +2 defense and +2 resistance, which I find to be really interesting because a lot of the time people will send their second and third hero to simply follow around their ruler's main stack. So this kind of just rewards players for playing the game the way they like to play the game, the way they usually play the game. So for that reason, I actually elevated this one all the way up to S tier. It is the only one that is next to Instructor because I really do think these two are the best options that you can get for ambitions in Age of Wonders 4. Now let's actually go back here to this window and place these guys in here. This one, as I just said, is an S tier, and these two, I believe they were in the B tier, right? Yeah, no, that is at least the right place for Steward. I think it's arguable that you could move Prospector into the A tier, but I think in general, because of the fact that it's going to be a lot harder to get the major ambition completed on heroes than it would be under Ruler, that it generally makes sense down here in B tier. But I don't know. I'm open to people's suggestions or thoughts on this placement. We're going to spend the last few minutes of this video creating one more quick tier list for the different governor traits that you can get on your heroes. They are randomly generated just like the ambition ones, and sometimes they combine very well, sometimes they don't. Generally speaking, I would say scholarly governor is quite useful, but if you don't have the ability to get renown, say like if you don't have the ability to get underground with this hero and excavate provinces and clear an underground infestation, then all of a sudden this thing is a lot less impactful and not something that you should take into consideration when you're trying to pick your next hero. As I said earlier, the main thing you should be taking into consideration is what type of class do I have available and how does that impact the rest of my army. Getting good uh, economic bonuses is nice, but it's not the main selling point of the heroes. Now, I think this is going to be easier to do if we just swap between um, this window with the tier list and this document with all of the things that you can get from the different governor bonuses. There are, as you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these guys. And we were just talking about the scholarly one where it says you get +5 knowledge. In the governed city. Research posts will give you a little bit more research. The research posts do not affect stability, and then you get extra knowledge per population in there. And the last level makes it so that you get just more knowledge across the board. This is phenomenal. This is something that we're going to put in S tier. And the scholarly ones, I have to remind myself, that's the book. All right, so the book goes up here at the top, right there. And then the ruler one is amazing too. This one's going to go right at the top here. Um, that one is uh, generally very good. It gives you lots of food. It makes it so that the cities grow quicker. You get Imperium in the city, and you also get extra ranks on your units once you've gone up to the 4th level of governorship, which does take some time. It's interesting. It says renown level 0, but I think that's 1 in game now, and this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. But generally speaking, I like this because it has everything near each other, so it's easy to compare them at a glance. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is the recruitment one because I like it. I think it's good. Recruitment governors, once they get up to this level, they make it so that they will make the units built in that city a higher rank, and then you can get +2 ranks off of the governor bonus right here. It's similar to the thing you get on the Godir governor, but you can get a lot more experience out of the recruiting governor. It does make it so you're able to build out your units quicker, and generally speaking, getting extra draft is pretty good in the early game, so it's nice that that comes into play relatively early here. Now let's take a second to place the icon for the recruiting governor here in the S tier. The next one we're going to talk about is the special province improvement one, which is the Anvil. I like this one quite a bit. This one says that the special provinces are just going to be easier to build. They'll cost less gold and less production at the first level. The next level, they will not affect the stability. It's kind of like how the conduits, or not conduits, the research posts don't affect stability at this level for the scholarly governor. In fact, a lot of the things at this level, the improvement based things, they take the stability malice away from their specific thing at the what would be kind of like level 2 or renown level 1 in this table. It's called renown level 1 here, but I think it's called level 2 in game. And then once you get past that for SPI, then it makes it so you get extra knowledge for each special province in that domain. That's a lot of knowledge. If you can get a lot of special province improvements from your research, that will power your research, and research is good. Research is one of the better resources in the game to try and get early, or really at any phase of the game. Governed cities get +2 mana and +2 gold for each special province is not nothing. I really think the main selling point of this is the fact that you can get your special province improvements built quicker, and then you get this extra knowledge. But if you want extra mana and gold, that's not bad too. The next governor we're going to go over is the Industrious governor. This one will make it so that your quarries are more efficient at the first level. You get +5 production on each quarry. At the next level, they won't have the stability penalty. And then after that, city structures are going to be less expensive. They're going to cost less gold, which is different than the special province thing. This will make it at the first level, will make special province improvements cost less gold and production. And I think this one doesn't have the production reduction, because I could see that getting a bit carried away with the extra production you get from quarries. I could see that taking very little gold and very little production to the point that it's just so much better than everything else. And they wanted to make it cost less gold, to make it so that you can afford to build the things that your production could be going for. If you have more production, you might get through your build queue a little bit earlier and not be able to afford the next building. But if it costs 20% less gold, then maybe you can get a little bit earlier. The fact that governed cities generate +2 gold for each city structure is completely negligible. This is not the main selling point of the Industrious governor. It's okay. It's something. If you can get there, you may as well. But I wouldn't go out my way to try and get the renown to get this governor bonus. The next thing in our list is the prospecting governor. I don't think it's quite as good as the quarry one, but it's still okay. It's still B tier in general. Mines are not the best province type because of the way boosts work, so I wouldn't actually go for this too often unless you're really, really needing gold. Cities are mostly for research and unit production, so getting gold out of your cities isn't necessary. You can get gold from other places like clearing the map. But yeah, let's just read this quickly. This says you get +5 gold for each mine, then there's no stability penalty, then you'll get extra gold for each population. Kind of not that amazing compared to these other things that you get at level 2, or I guess it's level 3 in game. I mentioned that earlier. Don't need to go over that every time I read these things. Just trying to make sure you're able to keep in mind that this is not that amazing when you compare it to like the Imperium you get for the Godir governor. And then of course at the last level here for the prospecting governor, you'll get 10% more gold. That's okay. I'd much rather have 10% more knowledge than 10% more gold. But I guess if that's the governor I have, that's the governor I have. After the Prospecting Governor, we have Fortification and Arcana in the next one. I want to say this is the Arcana icon, and this is the Fortification icon. And then, as you could probably guess, Agriculture and Nautical, they'll be here at the very bottom. I'm not a very big fan of either of these ones. But yeah, let's make sure we talk about not the Agriculture, but the Arcane one. So the Arcane Governor is going to give you more mana in your cities. The conduits will no longer give you the stability penalty. After that, you get extra mana for each population. It's pretty much the same as the Prospecting Governor, so I think we can move on from here. It's okay. It's maybe slightly better to have more gold income than more mana income, but this is going to be kind of dependent on your build. It might be actually better to get the mana. I just generally find myself needing gold more often than needing mana more often, so that's why this one is below and this one's above, even though they're very similar. Now, um, the next one rather is the Fortification, which is pretty bad, I would say. The Fortifying Governor will make it so that you get a reduction in the production and gold needed to make the defensive structures, which are generally pretty cheap. They don't need a giant reduction. The fact that you get extra stability for each defensive structure can add up to be quite nice if you have builds that really benefit from stability. I want to say that the high culture really benefits from having lots of stability. So this could work out okay in certain builds. And then you get draft at this level, and then the last one makes it so that you no longer get penalties from being besieged or having pillaged provinces, which is, I think, kind of negligible, but could be useful if you can get access to this ruler while somebody's trying to siege down your provinces. I don't see myself recruiting somebody and getting them up to renown level 4 in time very often, so I could see you actually like moving it further down. But I think in a weird way the agricultural governor and the nautical governor are worse, although I do think there are situations where you can get a lot of value out of growing your cities really quickly to be really large. Large cities have more provinces to get knocked down, and I think that the way the numbers work with pop growth makes it so that you get a lot less return on your farms in the late game than you do in the early game. So yeah, you get little food here, you get no stability penalty here, you get a little bit of gold, mana, and knowledge for each population, which is better than +2 gold. That's +3, like resources across the board. But what's the best resource? It's knowledge. So if getting 1 gold and 1 mana might be equal to 1 knowledge, making this on par, not better, but on par with the scholarly governor. That's just my 2 cents on it though. And then cost of gaining new population is reduced by 30% is okay, but that's pretty much what you get at Godir at this level of Godir governor, which is a lot easier to get to than the last level. And now we have the nautical governor, which makes it so water provinces give you extra food. That's not useful. It's like very useless. Raiding provinces in this city's domain takes 2 more turns can be kind of nice. It can keep people from bothering you and taking away your resources. The water provinces giving you extra mana is okay, but that's not one of the resources that I value highly. And then the last little thing here is water improvements grant +3 gold in the governed city domain. That's okay, it's something, but it's really not amazing compared to some of the other things you can get in here. So yeah, that's everything I had planned for this video. If you have any thoughts or feedback for me, please feel free to let me know in the comments section below. Until next time, have a good one.